3, 2, 1.
Welcome to Queen Stage. We're here to spotlight the athletes, stories, and action in women's cycling, giving the sport the attention it deserves. And we're going to do so with the quality, depth, and personality the sport demands.
I'm Rosario Torres Davis.
I'm Betsy Welch. I'm Anna Maria Roque.
And I'm Molly Herford.
Hello and welcome to Queen Stage. I'm Rosael and today I'm joined by Molly. Hi, Molly.
Hello.
If you're clipped in on Zwift right now, make sure your fan is on and that your water and your snacks are closed because we have a massive show for you right today.
I even have my fan just at my desk in case that this podcast heats up, which I think it absolutely could. This is the grand finale of our special series with Rapha and Zwift, and we are going out on an absolute high as the Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift starts this Saturday, August 1st.
Yeah, and if you missed it, please go back to our previous episode and listen to our Tour de France avec Zwift preview episode. And while you're at it, please also go and join our brand new Queen Stage WhatsApp community. The link is in our show notes right now, so come chat with us about the race or enjoy our behind-the-scene conversations during every stage.
And the summer of women's cycling keeps rolling right into the Rapha Women's 100 this September, so keep putting in the miles. Today's episode is proudly brought to you by Rapha and Zwift, two brands that have been instrumental in elevating women's racing and honoring its history.
And there's no better way to celebrate the upcoming tour than by looking back at the legendary rivalries that have paved the way.
These head-to-head battles didn't just crown champions, they pushed the entire sport to the heights that we are seeing today. And to talk about it, we are joined by two absolute legends of the peloton, both riders who have podiumed at races like Strade Bianche Dawn, La Flèche Wallonne, and La Course.
Yes, that's right. And the first rider is Ashleigh Moolman-Pasio, who has spent more than a decade proving what an African rider could do at the top of the sport, long before there was any infrastructure built to support one. Born in Pretoria and educated as a chemical engineer at Stellenbosch University, she turned pro in 2010 and became one of the most consistent climbers of her generation, racing 4 Olympic Games and taking bronze in the road race at the 2014 Commonwealth Games. In 2020, and I remember this very well because I was also riding my trainer a lot back then, she became the first ever UCI esports world champion, outclimbing Australia's Sara Gigante on a brutal virtual summit finish on Zwift. In 2021, she finished second overall at the Giro d'Italia Women and won her first Grand Tour stage. In 2022, after illness forced her out of the first Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift, she bounced back that fall at the Tour de Romandie Feminine, dropping Annemiek van Vleuten, the one and only, on the summit finish at Lyon to take the overall title and become the first African rider ever to win a UCI Women's World Tour stage race. Now riding out her final professional season with AG Insurance Soudal, she has become a mentor advisor to Team Amani, the first women's UCI continental team based in Africa, helping build the pathway for the next generation of African riders.
And she's done so much for the women's peloton through her years, along with the amazing Lizzie Deignan, who is also joining us today. She built her name as one of the most versatile classics riders of her generation. Is that our generation? It might be our generation. Long before Paris-Roubaix ever came calling for the women's peloton. She broke through on the track originally before shifting her primary focus to the road in 2009. And by 2012, she stood on the Olympic podium in, where else? London, taking silver in the road race behind other legend of the sport, Marianne Vos. 3 years later, at the 2015 World Championships in Richmond, Virginia. Gosh, I forgot that we had World Championships in Richmond, Virginia.
I was there and I saw it happen.
Amazing. Back then, she was racing. You might remember her as Lizzie Armistead, and she outsprinted Anna van der Breggen, another legend, by just over a wheel's length to become a world champion. In 2016, she won the Tour of Flanders, edging out Emma Johannesson in a 2-up sprint after the pair broke clear on the Oude Quermont. There we go. Close enough. And in 2020, she topped the individual UCI Women's World Tour standings, winning a thrilling edition of La Course in a photo finish, then took Liège-Bastogne-Liège that October, soloing clear on La Redoute and holding off Grace Brown by just 9 seconds. And yes, that is a long list. That is not even the full list of Palmares.
No.
But all of those triumphs were just a prelude to the race that would fundamentally redefine her legacy. Returning to sport as a mother, she became a trailblazer all over again, winning the first edition of Paris-Roubaix Femmes. So,
yeah,
I mean,
and getting the triple crown of monuments, like the first woman to ever do that. Amazing.
So excited to chat with these two today. Should we get into it?
Yeah, let's get into it. Hello, Ashleigh. Welcome to Queen Stage. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, so nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
We're waiting for Lizzie to join us. She's just running a few minutes late, but we're so excited that we just had to get this started. So Ashleigh, this whole series is about rivalries. And today is focused on the rivalries that have shaped the Tour de France Femmes and shape people, as athletes. And we just wanted to start off with you asking, has there been a rivalry that you have experienced yourself or that you have observed? And it could be outside of cycling or in cycling that really inspired you or changed how you approach cycling.
Well, I mean, cycling is a very competitive sport. And what I find sometimes quite unique about it is that we're fierce competitors on the bike. So when you're on the bike and you're racing, we're going full gas and everyone wants to go for the win. But what's quite unique, I think, in cycling, but I think maybe even more so in women's cycling, is that we're quite supportive and friendly off the bike. And I think that comes across quite nicely in TV coverage and in these spotlights, that you'll see two people racing head to head, really close finish, and then afterwards still going and hugging one another and embracing one another. So I think the rivalry that I've experienced has generally been like a positive rivalry, so it's competition on the bike. But then I really love the way that we can, be professional and be, good people afterwards and still have friendships and respect one another. But yeah, sport is riddled with rivalry, politics, unfortunately, sometimes for the good and for the bad. And so throughout my career, obviously, I've been doing this for many, many years. This is my 17th season at the highest level in Europe. So obviously, I've seen a lot of different things, experienced different rivalries, different politics through the years. But I would say, yeah, it's an interesting question. I wouldn't necessarily say, yeah, I'm trying to think about it. Of course, rivalry or competition, let's say in my career at first with Marianne Vos and Emma Pooley, in the early parts of my career, that was probably the first sort of rivalry or competition, but rivalry in a positive way. I have a lot of respect for both riders, Emma and for Marianne. Marianne has probably played quite a big role in my career, and that she was really the rider I looked up to when I was really coming into the sport. She was also very kind to, I joined the Dutch national team for some training rides in South Africa when I was still very new to the sport. And she was very kind and open, which made me feel like, oh, I belong here. I'm accepted in this realm. But then when we raced each other, we were fierce rivals or fierce competitors. At first, she was much better than me, because I came in obviously quite green at one point, and I was really just so honored to be in her company. And then it's come to latter years where we have even been teammates as well. So that was a really cool experience. But then I've also had situations where, of course, I've raced alongside and against Annemiek. She's been a teammate as well as a competitor. Demi Bollerung been a teammate as well as a competitor. So yeah, of course, there's a healthy element of rivalry there, but I think always off the bike, we've had good relationships and been friends, which is also really cool.
Yeah. I also wonder if, especially when you first were getting started, the main rivalry was almost the women's peloton versus the world, in that all of you were campaigning for better racing conditions, higher salaries at all of this stuff. So I think maybe that almost like bonded the women's peloton together in this really unique way because you all did need to fight for like where we finally are at now in women's cycling.
Yeah, definitely. That's a really good point. So when I first entered into the sport, I got into it like later in life, in that I only discovered my talent while I was studying at university, and I studied chemical engineering. So it was quite a big degree, and it took a lot of dedication and hard work to get through it, and obviously played a role in forming who I am today. And then through my time at university, I discovered my talent because my husband introduced me to cycling. And as I finished my degree, I came over to Europe to pursue a career as a professional cyclist. At the time, most people thought I was barking mad because I had this really impressive degree. And here I was in Europe racing for nothing, literally just because I wanted to become the best athlete I could be. I wanted to represent my country at an Olympic Games, and I just wanted to win bike races. So when I first started, I actually wasn't even being paid anything. I had to be super creative around how to make ends meet as a career. And I did find it really difficult when I first entered into professional cycling because I came from a male-dominated degree. So most of my classmates were men, but we worked really well together. So there was a lot of teamwork, a lot of support, mutual respect between the different sexes, and then came into cycling where there was so much disparity. And at first I found this really hard to accept, and I found myself kind of beating my head against the wall because it felt like everything I tried to say or stand up for, you just kept hitting the wall and being knocked right down. So I very quickly learned that I had to change that frustration into something a bit more productive. And that's where I felt like, okay, I need to lead by example. And I think exactly as you say, that's what's really has bonded a lot of us female cyclists because we've had this common drive to lead by example, to show the world why we deserve equality, why we deserve equal opportunity, at least. And that's really brought us together. And I think also what brought a lot of us of my era into cycling in the first place was purely passion for the sport, passion to race our bikes, passion to become the best athletes we could possibly be. And so the driving force was not necessarily financial gain or fame. It was totally the opposite. And so now it's evolved, and I'm so happy to see how women's cycling has evolved. I'm happy to have been part of that evolution, fighting for it, and to have been able to experience it firsthand. But it does make, the undertone of the women's peloton somewhat unique and special. Well, at least those of us that are still around. Maybe it's starting to change a little bit because it is really a viable career now. But yeah, it really does make our peloton unique and special.
Yeah, and now you are an advisor slash mentor for Team Amani, which is trying to, reach the goal of one day attending the Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift, or races like the Giro d'Italia, La Vuelta Femenina by 2028. What's the one piece, like whether that's funding, a race invitation, or something less obvious that would help move that timeline to get them to reach that goal?
Yeah, I suppose funding is probably the biggest. It would have the biggest impact for sure. The team is a really cool project. It's been around for a few years. It's been gaining momentum. It started off initially with the mindset of, instead of taking the African athletes and sort of dumping them in the deep end in Europe and hoping that they'd find a way to swim, the mindset was, okay, we'll bring the highest level of racing to Africa, to our athletes, so that they can evolve and develop in a more comfortable home environment. And so the team also started the migration gravel race in Kenya and some other gravel races in Kenya. And this was how they sort of led by example. with this whole mindset. But as the team has evolved, the founder, Michael, and Sule, who unfortunately passed away. He's a Kenyan rider who was racing gravel for the team and unfortunately passed away when hit by a car, actually at Vermont Overland. And so Michael was in two minds. Does he continue? Because his ambition was always to empower African cyclists and African leaders, now being actually American himself. Like he was put in the position, like questioning whether he should continue or not. But I'm really happy he did, because he'd gotten so far. Him and Sule had gotten so far already in terms of the impact that they've made, that now we're at a point where the talent is just so evident. And in particular, the women are so close to that top level that the team has made the decision to sort of fast track their ambitions and to really invest in bringing these African athletes to Europe. But this time, with the mentality that, okay, maybe they're not going to be in their comfort zone being in such a foreign culture, but we're going to do our best to construct an environment around them that helps them to remain comfortable and be surrounded by familiar cultures and people. So the idea is that the team is really run by all African staff that understand the cultures and the needs of the African riders. It's an all African team, so we're not employing any foreign riders to be part of the team. And we've seen how that's been working so well. We had the women's team over in Girona. We'd see how every morning they'd continue with their little rituals. Like the Ethiopians have a coffee ritual that they do every day. They roast their own beans, and it's a whole hour-long ritual. But they're continuing to practice these rituals because they're surrounded by people that understand it and allow them those opportunities. And it was incredible to see how the girls grew. I mean, they had literally 7 weeks in Europe racing, and how they started off immediately really impressive, finishing in the top 40s, then progressing in the next weeks to top 30s. And then finally, one of the riders, Jerry from Ethiopia, finished 20th at the Volta Catalunya amongst some really impressive names. So this is really like confirmation that we're on the right track. But yeah, the biggest challenge really right now is funding. We have some great partners, industry brands mostly. So Factor, Rapha, POC are the big contributors to the team. But now, we really are on a mission to try and find a bit more financial support to be able to keep building this team and taking it to the highest level. What has been really great is that with me coming on board as an advisor, ambassador, I did reach out to a lot of the race organizations myself to get them starts, and that was received really well. Off the back of the Rwanda World Championships, a lot of the races in Europe had opened their eyes to Africa, and that we need to continue to create opportunity for African riders. And I think, of course, it also helped to have a bit of credibility, behind the team, with me standing as an ambassador for them and saying, please, I believe in this project, so please give the team a start. So yeah, it's been really, really positive.
And do you, in particular, do you have a ritual or something that you do just to keep yourself comfortable when you're traveling and away from home and all these things?
Yeah, I mean, I do. I also actually really like to sort of keep my coffee routine. I'm not quite the same as the Ethiopians in that I don't actually roast my own beans in the hotel room. But yeah, I always travel with my own little mini kettle and my AeroPress and coffee grinder. It's something I really like to start my day off, in a sort of calm way. Make my own coffee, sit in my own space, enjoy the coffee, wake up slowly, stretch, and then take on the day. So before I go to breakfast with my teammates, that's my ritual.
Thank you, Ashleigh.
Hey.
Hi, Lizzie. How are
Hi.
you?
I'm good, thank you. I've been in the wrong place. I've been in a Teams call.
No, you arrived just in time. It's all good. Thank you so much for joining us. We've been chatting with Ashleigh about her role as a mentor/advisor for Team Amani, and she mentioned a couple of things that were really cool. First of all, how one of the things that we need to bring this team, for example, to events like the Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift. We need more racing, right, happening in Africa so they can race, in their familiar places and all that. They need funding. And also just things very practical things that Ashleigh was just sharing from her own experience as well, of like bringing in things that when you're traveling make you feel comfortable. So you have like a routine, a ritual, something that allows you to stay grounded and present and ready to tackle the training, the racing that you're doing outside of home. So Ashleigh was talking to us about her coffee routine. And on that topic, Lizzie, do you have any rituals, any comfort things that you do when you're not at home?
Do you know, I think I was unusual in that aspect, probably compared to my team. I was pretty flexible, I would say. Like, very easygoing about what time breakfast was and those sorts of things. Probably to the detriment of being a good roommate sometimes. I was very flexible, so I didn't need to get up and have, I had teammates who got up and did yoga and then they had a lemon juice and all these different kinds of things. But I'll take coffee and a wake up call whenever my teammate's alarm goes off. Like I was really, really easygoing actually.
Okay, that's another superpower to be that flexible, because that can help a lot, especially in cycling. Molly, do you want to take one of the questions for Lizzie?
Well, I think we have to come back to the rivalries question that we kicked it off with. So, Lizzie, this is kind of all about this idea of rivalries, and both you and Ashleigh are so fun to talk to because you've been in the sport for so long. So let's like go way back to beginning of your cycling career. I mean, who if anyone, did you consider to be your greatest rival in all of your, especially early years of racing? Which, we're just really starting with like the light question here. No, no tough ones.
Well, I think Ashley will probably agree with me. When we first started, similar time, there was only really one rival. Everyone was trying to beat Marianne Vos.
She
I
said the
feel
same. Yeah.
so. She was a rival everywhere for me. I mean, I started on the track. She turned up at track races sometimes and won, and then on the road as well. So everywhere I turned, there was always Marianne Vos to try and beat. Yeah.
If you'd shifted to cyclocross, she was right there. Even mountain biking for like a year or two.
Yeah, and what does the image of somebody like Marianne Vos? I also feel similarly about Anna van der Breggen. Now that she came back to racing, you have these two rivals who have been rivals of every woman in the peloton for so long. What do you think they represent to the women in the peloton today who are still racing with them?
I would say longevity is what they both have done so well. To be winning consistently for so long is really impressive for me physically, but also mentally, particularly Mariana, that she still turns up at every race with the fire in her eyes and wants to win everything. I find that incredible. I think Anna is a little bit different. I think she picks and chooses a little bit more than Mariana does. But yeah, just the will to win for me is the most impressive thing.
Yeah, and I'm actually super curious about that because I think that will to win can't come from the idea of like, I don't know how exactly I'm going to phrase this, but like pissed off rivalries. Like you have these rivalries with people and you want to win, but you can't go into it angry and stay in the sport for as many years as someone like Vos has done. Does that make sense? Am I completely off base?
Well, I think it's really individual actually, and what motivates you, and whether I've seen you've done a series on rivalries and where the rivalries come from, but I think probably Mariana has had several rivals, the main one being herself, because there's been these periods of dominance in her career where she needed to beat herself essentially, and obviously with the evolution of the sport, she's come across more and more rivals, which has probably helped keep her motivated, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. And Lizzie, after having your first baby in 2018 and you came back to professional racing to win, the one and only Paris-Roubaix Femmes in 2021, the first edition, of the race, couples that had never hosted a women's professional race before. Was there a rival, a specific competitor, an idea in your head that was pushing you to win and and continue going solo in those 80 kilometers?
I'd say my rival on that day was probably misogyny.
Ooh, say more.
Say
Yeah.
more.
Um, it was actually like a really special win because it felt collectively like as a peloton we were there to undermine all of the kind of stereotypes that women's cycling had faced for so long. And I felt like the race was so much bigger than me. The victory was so much bigger than me. Funnily enough, the person chasing me down was actually Marianne Vos in the final. But yeah, she wasn't my biggest rival that day. I would say it was the underestimation of, 125 years the race was for the men. It was their 125th edition and our first. So it was a good fire in the belly, definitely, that rivalry. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was actually fueling you during those moments. Like, did you have an idea? Did you know that we were missing out on the coverage of when you first broke away?
No, I had no idea. No,
Okay.
it's not something when you're racing, it's not something you even think about or consider. You're just in there playing the game of the race. So no, I had no idea. But what I do now realize, even though it was less than you couldn't see my whole race, but still, whenever people talk to me about my victories, they talk about Paris-Roubaix, and it's because they could see it. Like, I won a whole load of other races before that, and no one ever talks to me about Flanders or Strada because it was a highlights package on YouTube, whereas at least they were able to see some of what I did in Roubaix.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it is very interesting because maybe the misogyny that maybe fueled you for some of the race was also the same misogyny we felt that we were missing out on those first kilometers. So yeah, it's almost like without realizing we were sharing this little anger and then the joy of seeing you win and hold off the peloton and all that. But since you brought it up, has there been a win in your career that is at the top of your list?
Probably the world title in Richmond, I would say, because cycling is unique in that way that we can win that rainbow jersey. It's incredibly special. It's an iconic thing. And I coached myself to that world title, and I did a lot of the prep work going into that race by myself. So it was really a really proud moment for me. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. I was actually there, and I think some of our other co-hosts were there as well. So we saw you win back then, and it was very, very exciting. I was a track racer, so I was extra exciting for me just to see a trackie and see you, sprint in the track style to take
Yeah.
that championship. So that was very special. And now you're stepping into a sporting director role with the Great Britain Cycling. And also the Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift is coming to Yorkshire in 2027. There's a lot going on. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So I suppose in retirement you get all these kind of different opportunities, and it's about figuring out what suits you. And I'm really open minded. I'm saying yes to loads of different things, but I've had a small taste already of the DS role with Great Britain Cycling Team. Um, and I really like that. I really like the sport side of it. That kind of, you have to trust your energy, how you feel after doing certain things. And I felt excited and motivated after working with the women. So I would like to definitely explore that more. And my role with the GB team will basically be about bringing our best British riders together and taking on the rest of the world together. Because we have really strong women, and I really believe that we have an opportunity to get a world title in the next couple of years. So that's really exciting.
I love it. I love it. Now, I actually want to come back to how we were just talking about the coverage and how the coverage of women's cycling has gotten so much better over the last, let's say, like 6 or 7 years, even. And I'm curious, as we're talking about rivalries, maybe 15, 20 years ago, we weren't getting to see any of the races. So we didn't really get to see those like finish lines and the way that the riders were connecting. And even, pre-Instagram, we never really got to see the riders talking about each other or having these conversations or putting anything out other than a finish line interview that maybe got published, maybe if we were lucky.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, how has all of the coverage, whether it's social media, whether it's actually, stuff being televised, interviews like this, or just interviews on all of these different websites, how do you think that's changed the peloton in terms of rivalries, whether it's between riders or teams or any of that?
I mean, it's dramatically changed a lot of it. Yeah. I mean, I don't know about Ashleigh, but I feel really lucky that my career started when it did and finished when it did, actually, because I got to see the best of both worlds. And I feel a sense of, I feel sorry for people like Ina Joktutenberg, Georgia Bronzini, Kirsten Wild, 3 of the best sprinters in the world. Their rivalry would tell an amazing story now if it was journaled on social media or TV or whatever, because
Yes.
we don't quite have that at the moment. Lorena is just smashing every sprint. And we don't have that kind of an interesting narrative really there. But if we'd have had those things available 10, 15 years ago, like those 3 going head to head every bunch sprint would have made brilliant reading and watching. So yeah, the sport has obviously dramatically changed. And we're able to tell stories a lot more, understand characters a lot more than we ever used to. And I do feel a sense of, regret that there's some brilliant characters and rivalries from the past that we don't know about.
Yeah, I mean, exactly as Lizzie said, I'm also really happy that I've managed to experience the full evolution. I'm still at it, but definitely coming to an end at the end of this year. So I'm also looking forward to the next chapter. And I mean, I think the big challenge now is that, of course, all the exposure has brought such a big boom in women's cycling. So we're just seeing, the top level of the sport is really growing exponentially. Big teams like FDJ Suez are continuing to grow, sign more talent, attract more sponsorship. And that's really wonderful. And for the most part, the World Tour is experiencing that. But where there's a big challenge at the moment in women's cycling is the development of the lower levels. Because unfortunately, what is happening now with sometimes, good exposure, but limited exposure. So if we look just in this year, for example, where at a race like Liège-Bastogne-Liège, the exposure that made it onto air was predominantly of Demi, riding off the front, so FDJ Suez would have got maximum exposure out of that race, and rightly so. I mean, she put on an incredible performance, and she obviously deserved that exposure, but before she broke away, it wasn't on TV, so nobody saw anything else of the race. And that's where it's creating more and more challenge for the sort of continental level or even the World Tour teams with lower budgets. It's becoming more and more difficult for them to be able to keep up and to compete because they're not necessarily able to guarantee the same exposure to their partners. So that's one of the downfalls that we're starting to see. Like the sport is booming. Salaries are increasing every year. We see the level is just growing. The depth is growing because young riders can now, or young girls at school can look up to people at the World Tour level, to Demi, to Lotte Kopecky, and they can dream of being professional cyclists and think of it as a career, not just as a passion, which both Lizzie and I probably had to think at the time. And so we see it booming, but then at the same time, it's becoming increasingly difficult for smaller teams. And even if I just take Team Amani, for example, to be able to attract sponsorship, to create pathways for development and for new coming talent. So that's one of the challenges. But yeah, it's fantastic how stories are being told now. And as you were speaking about Lizzie, I was thinking, maybe there's room for like some kind of series that dives back into like, the characters before. There's so many inspiring female cyclists who have such incredible stories to tell, and maybe we need to do some kind of documentary series, which goes and touches base and looks into archive footage of these rivalries and catches up with these characters. I think it would be really exciting.
All
I
right. Well,
agree.
you heard it here first.
Yeah.
We want dibs on this. We want to produce, write, and host, and maybe with some help from Orla Chenui and other Rose Manley and other amazing journalists out there, we could put something really good together. Because no, those are names that are on my list. I have a list of people that I would like to interview. And for precisely that reason, Georgia Brancini, Ina Yoko-Turenberg, and
Yeah.
Kristen Wild. Yeah, I have a picture with her that I took at the World Championships in Glasgow at the Velodrome. It's amazing people. But yeah, like we have so many questions for them. So true that their stories have not been told in the modern way, in a way that it could engage really the future generations. All right, so should we move on to our next question? Let's see. So Annemiek van Vleuten dominated the first yellow jersey in 2022 at the Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift, and Demi Vollering took it from her at the Col de Tourmalet, and it was kind of like a passing of the torch. How do you think that modern rivalry has changed the aggression of the sport, or the way other athletes are approaching this stage race, this Grand Tour?
And was it a passing of the torch or a grabbing of the torch?
Yeah.
Well, I think the key point is that there are more and more rivalries than there have ever been before. It's harder to win every race now than it's ever been before, because of the strength and depth, because of the things like the minimum wage that was introduced 5 years ago, 6 years ago, probably now. We're starting to see that sort of the changes that have happened in recent history are starting to have an effect on the peloton now. I think, Ashleigh, you will agree, it's never been harder to be a professional female cyclist, right? The level is getting harder and harder every year. And
Definitely.
that means that it's at the Tour de France, when everybody is not only fighting to be in selection for the Tour de France. I mean, that never happened 5, 6 years ago. You knew your race program. There was no selection for races. Like you got a race program at the start of the year, whereas the Tour de France, it's a full on selection now because of the strength and depth in the peloton. So everybody's absolutely peaking for the Tour de France. So that's the impact that's had now. The yellow jersey is incredibly hard to achieve.
Yeah, and since both of you were witness to, different editions of this race, and from La Course presented by the Tour de France now to a full-on 9-day stage race, what was it like behind the scenes to see those changes happening, and also knowing that retirement was getting close for both of you?
Go for it,
Yeah,
Ashleigh.
I'm going to jump in. Yeah, so I actually never did the La Course edition on the Champs-Élysées. Like I had quite a sort of, an internal sort of battle going on inside myself, because I really felt like it was a consolation prize. It was just something to kind of keep everyone happy and to shut up the women's peloton. And so I didn't really I didn't internally approve of it. And in a way, I'm quite happy that I never actually took part, because it kind of allowed me to stay true to, my values and how I felt about it. But not that I'm criticizing anyone who did, because obviously at the time, in women's cycling, it was a great opportunity, and it would be silly to pass that opportunity down. I did then take part in La Course events, which moved away from the Champs-Élysées, and which, took on climbs or stages, that the men were also doing. And that was a wonderful experience, because it was the first sort of introduction to the Tour de France and how big it is, and the crowds and the infrastructure and the security and all of that around it. You really got a sense of how big it was. But then what was really incredible, and something that I will never forget, because it's a transformational moment in women's cycling, was actually the COVID pandemic. How Zwift stepped in
and the virtual Tour de France that took part on Zwift. And I was very much a part of that because I was in Spain during the COVID pandemic. I had to adhere to really strict restrictions. I had to stay at home. I couldn't go out and train. So although I hated training indoors at the time, I really was forced to embrace it because we didn't know, when competition would return. Was the Olympic Games going to happen or not? So I really did take to Zwift and to training and racing online. And I actually, funny enough, became completely converted through the whole experience, the whole community aspect, the whole, the reach of the virtual world. It's something that I'm stupidly still doing. So I've been racing a bit online recently because we haven't had a lot of racing. But during the virtual Tour de France during the COVID pandemic, it was a real light bulb moment, just how big that event was. And I really do believe that it was instrumental in, the change that we're experiencing today, because it was during the COVID pandemic and Zwift staying true to their values, which was if we do something, we're going to do it equal. So they forced the Tour de France to do an equal event for both men and women on Zwift during that period. And that opened the eyes of the ASO to see the popularity of women's sport and to see that it attracted the same viewership, the same excitement as the men's race. And I took part in some of those stages of the virtual Tour de France. And for example, I won the Queen stage up the Alpe du Zwift or whatever it was, or the climb that they'd created. And it was so clear to me, the impact of that, because at that time it was open. I could go out on the road afterwards. So I raced, I won the Queen stage and then went out riding. And I happened to pass through Girona and stop at a coffee shop. And it was so clear how that visibility was changing things, because all of a sudden I'd stop at a coffee shop and my husband said, do you see that the people are pointing at you? And this had never happened before. Because we didn't have the exposure, people didn't necessarily know women's cyclists unless they were really, really invested in supporting and being fans. But now all of a sudden, just being in the public eye meant people were recognizing me. And as I was leaving Girona that day, a car actually came up sort of quite close to me and slowed down, and the window opened up and someone stuck out a camera, and I was like, whoa, it blew my mind. I'd never experienced anything like that. So it was just so incredible to see that change, and then how that event opened the eyes of the ASO. Then Zwift sort of put their money where their mouth is, and they got behind the event. And now we have the real life Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift, and we've seen the impact that's had on women's cycling. Women's cycling is where it is today because of that. And I knew that all these years leading up to that, I knew that's what women's cycling needed. But as much as we wanted it and fought for it and tried to stand up for it, the most we were given was a one-day race. And then it took the COVID pandemic and a brand like Zwift getting behind us and now creating what we have today. And it's just, it gives me goosebumps actually to think about it, because
no, I'm getting goosebumps. I'm getting
Mm-hmm.
goosebumps as well, because I remember that time really well. That was actually, I think, Ashleigh, you were also very active on podcasts at that time, because I remember listening to you about how you won the eWorld Championships and yes, and how all of this with Zwift was a proof of concept that there was enough of an audience to share, and the people were interested. And it also coincided, with GCN becoming more of a bigger platform, that didn't live for very long, but it gave visibility to female commentators like Orla Chenui, who I mentioned before. But all of a sudden we had Zwift. We were all on it. We were all watching that race. We were watching more racing happening on TV thanks to GCN. And all these amazing people just getting the visibility that they always deserve. And a question for both of you, because both of you have known that you were right about things that should be different in the sport for a long time. And for a lot of people, that can be very soul crushing, where it makes you want to give up. It doesn't matter how much personal success you may have, but you know that you're right, and you have connected with people that have confirmed this for you. But how do you turn that into a positive, or how do you simply deal with that emotion so you don't retire before your time comes, so you don't give up and you don't become a negative influence in the people that you're now trying to advise and coach?
I mean, I never got into cycling because I wanted to be rich or famous, right? I got into it because I love riding my bike and I love racing. So it was a source of frustration, but I never ever thought about quitting because of it. My dreams were to become world champion, Olympic champion. So the focus was always on those singular dreams and how do I achieve those, rather than more kind of nuanced stuff of I want to earn this minimum salary or this. Like it was very much from an athlete point of view, like the dream I was focusing on. So although I got frustrated, my happy place was always in a bike race. So there was never a consideration for me.
How about you, Ashleigh?
Yeah, so from my side, I kind of touched on it a little bit earlier where, I unlike Lizzie, like I've always loved sport, but I actually only really discovered my talent and discovered the possibility to even go as far as I have in sport while I was studying. So I came kind of from a background, from engineering background, problem solving, analytical, strategic sort of mindset, which I was taught during my degree. I came into cycling with that background. So when I first entered into the sport, I did find it incredibly frustrating, that although I was super passionate about riding my bike, I loved racing, I loved riding, I loved the adventure, I loved the personal growth I was experiencing, evolving as an athlete. So that always kind of kept me very engaged and satisfied in terms of training and putting the effort in. But I did find it frustrating that we had so much disparity and inequality, and um, I had to learn really early on to channel that in a positive way, because if you do take it as frustration on a day-to-day basis, then it's just negative, right? You're not going to get anything positive out of that, because as an athlete, you also need positive energy to be able to get the best out of yourself. So I just had to learn quite early on that I needed to use maybe the skill set that I'd learned through my schooling career in terms of public speaking, in terms of writing, to use that in a positive way, to lead by example, to share my opinions, to talk openly about my thoughts, and always finding a way to do it in such a way that it came across in a positive light rather than in a super negative light or in a victim mentality state, So I think it also helped me to become the person that I am today. So through obviously growing in confidence through my sporting abilities and through my career and achievements on the bike, it helped me to grow in confidence as a person and as a leader. And then I suppose maybe lucky enough, is it luck, or is it something from the actions or the things that we've all done as a peloton, that change happened kind of slowly but steadily enough that it kept me engaged, and yeah, to be honest, I mean, I was supposedly going to retire on many occasions, but then didn't, because the sport kept evolving, the contract offers got better, the opportunities got better, and again, then just turning a bit of a spotlight to Lizzie, which we haven't mentioned. I mean, that's something also that has been incredible in terms of what Lizzie has done for the sport, in leading by example, in staying true to her values and showing that sport and motherhood can be combined, because that was also probably one of the reasons why I had thought I was going to retire much either. I'm still not a mother, so although I want to be. So unfortunately, I haven't actually acted on everything, the pathway that Lizzie has laid out for everyone now, but it's just so wonderful to see how the longevity of the sport has just multiplied, because young athletes are realizing that they don't have to quit anymore to be able to start a family. We're seeing a flurry of pregnancy announcements coming out of the peloton, and that just makes me super, super happy as well, because Lizzie maybe was faced with the thought that she had to retire, but she stood up for what she believed in. And I don't know the details of her story, but I'm sure it was super challenging, having to, step away from a team, being hired by another team during the course of her pregnancy. But yeah, that's also really changed the face of women's cycling. So always a lot of respect for Lizzie on that one.
Thanks, Ashley.
Go ahead, Molly.
I was going to say, Lizzie, we haven't actually really touched on what rivalry looks like for you today, now with your with your riding, like, are you still riding? Do you still kind of have any of those like internal rivalries going? Like if you're out for a ride and someone's ahead of you on the road, are you just like, I'm going to get that guy?
Yeah,
Or
or
no,
maybe now in the coaching side too. Like, are you in a rivalry with another coach, another country?
Yes. Yes. We're gonna be that's one thing for sure. No, I think probably that was a chink in my armor, I have to admit, as an athlete. I wasn't as, I know it sounds ridiculous, professional athlete, but I don't consider myself to be an overly competitive person. I'm not a sore loser. Like, I move on very quickly. It was always about beating myself. My inner motivation was always to try and beat myself. And now I'm learning to just be kind to myself, which is quite novel. I don't need to beat myself up and go into the hurt locker every time I ride my bike. I'm really focusing on my health and my mental well-being, and it's really lovely to just ride a bike and not think about suffering and constantly chasing improvement. I'm really enjoying that aspect of it. The bike can be so many different things to so many people, and for me at the moment, at this point in my life, it's definitely not about rivalries. It's about all the fluffy stuff that comes with it, really.
Oh,
all
that's
the fluffy
beautiful.
stuff. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
And we need to get to our last couple of questions because we definitely want to ask you about who are your riders to watch for this year's Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift. But before we get there, the women's cycling for a long time was dominated by a lot of good Dutch cyclists. And then last year we saw Pauline Ferrand-Prévot giving France, a win that they have been waiting for a long time in home soil. How do you think somebody like Pauline Ferrand-Prévot, is changing racing now that she's back on the road? Any thoughts on that?
Well, I thought it was, brilliant. So good that, like you say, the French had been waiting for so long, and then they just needed a woman to come and do the job.
Right?
It was brilliant. I think she's totally captured the imagination of the French people. The French love the Tour de France, Vive la France. The atmosphere around the Tour de France is huge, and now you have that whole viewership just keeping the TV on for an extra week to watch Pauline. Like, the viewing figures were insane last year, and what that win has done for cycling in France is huge. So I mean, she's just a phenomenal athlete, isn't she? Everywhere she turns, and she has elevated the rivalries again. In the Tour de France, we didn't expect her to. I didn't expect her to just show up and blow the sport apart, but that's what she's done, and everybody has just got to constantly up their game. And nobody is going into the Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift thinking they know who their rivals are, because we're at a point in the sport where anybody could just pop up and show their talent. So it's really exciting. There's some real emerging talent. We've seen, Kate Courtney's now signed on the road. It'd be interesting to see what she's done. She can do. I think it's definitely Pauline switching over to the road has definitely captured the imagination of lots more riders, I would say.
Yes, definitely. We have also I like to call them disruptors because it just makes it more unpredictable. There's now with Paola Blasi also coming from duathlon and not knowing what to expect. Ashleigh, do you have any thoughts on now seeing basically more nationalities fighting for the top steps of the podium at such a race?
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. And I mean, just touching on Paola Blasi. So, of course, Pauline Ferrand-Prévot came and dominated last year's Tour de France Femmes and really made the French fans super, super happy, which was great to see. But we saw that again this year with Paola Blasi and the La Vuelta Femenina and even the Vuelta Catalunya. And I was racing both. And to be honest, it's so cool to see when the fans, obviously that people come from far and wide sometimes to watch these events, but then to see people on home grounds, being able to support athletes that are from their area, it's so impactful, and it's just wonderful to see, because it's drawing in more and more fans. I think we just keep growing the fan base by introducing these new talents, and new amazing, super impressive performances. And I think that at this year's Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift, it's very difficult to predict from today, like who we think is going to win. I think it's quite an open race, which makes the sport super, super exciting. It's going to engage the fans and keep us probably on the edge of our seats till the very last second, I hope, because I think that's what brings in, more and more fans, is keeping it this exciting. Unfortunately, with the men's Tour de France, unfortunately, fortunately, however you want to look at it, but it's pretty much a done deal with the yellow jersey already. So I'm hoping that for the women's tour, it will be a bit more competitive until the end, which we had in 2024, and it made it super, super exciting. I think that this year's edition of the time trial again is going to kind of limit a little bit the field in terms of who I predict could take the win. I think we are looking more towards like the Marlon Reusses, Paula Blasi, Demi Vollering. I think riders like Pauline is maybe a little bit cussier, a little bit out of their comfort zone this time around because of the nature of the time trial. But of course, they're working super hard on that because they're competitive. They've tasted that victory before, so they want to taste it again. But yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see, are there going to be some real big surprises that we're not even aware of? But if you ask me today, I would say my favorites would probably be Demi and Paula Blasi, and I'd say Marlon is sort of knocking on the door, kind of keeping me a little bit on my feet because I'm not sure what to expect from her.
Definitely. How about you, Lizzie?
So Ashleigh's spot on there. Yeah, absolutely. The time trial totally puts the cat amongst the pigeons, really, because you have riders like Cassia and Pauline, who traditionally that's going to be their weak spot. So are they going to tactically, what are they going to do about that? Because obviously, they can do everything they can physically to prepare for that time trial, but actually the most impactful thing they can do is change their tactics around the other stages. So I expect it to be really dynamic and aggressive, which is I'm so pleased to be watching rather than racing. Let's put it that way.
Definitely. Molly, do you have any last questions?
No, I think that's a perfect spot to wrap up on. Lizzie, Ashleigh, thank you both so much for hanging out with us. This was so fun.
Cool. Thanks for having us.
It was really fun.
All right, so that is it for today at Queen Stage. A massive thank you to Ashleigh and Lizzie for joining us, and a huge heartfelt thank you to Rapha and Zwift for supporting this podcast.
And remember to join our brand new Queen Stage WhatsApp community. We want you to see everything that we are chatting about through every stage.
And we want to hear your questions too.
100%. Yeah, this is the best place to ask us the dumb questions, the silly questions, the really difficult questions. Come join us on WhatsApp and let us know what you're thinking. As always, thank you so much for listening, and we will be back very soon with more race analysis and stories from the women's peloton.